you to yet another way to connect your ideas in speaking and writing. Throughout these lessons, you will learn about subordinating conjunctions like even though, because, and others. Although these types of words will accomplish the same task as some of the transition words you learned last week, you will learn how they are used differently within sentences, both in terms of their placement and punctuation. Introduction to Adverb Clauses. To understand adverb clauses, it is important to review what an independent clause is. You probably already know that an independent clause has a complete subject and verb and can stand alone as a complete thought. For example, gymnasts are amazing athletes. Their ability seems to defy gravity. These are two complete sentences that can stand alone or be joined by a conjunction, a coordinating conjunction. This is the first independent clause, and this is the second independent clause. You can think of an independent clause as a clause that is strong enough to stand alone. Just like me and this wall, we are independent of each other. When I'm standing on my own 2 feet, I don't need any support to stay upright. A dependent clause, like an independent clause, has a subject and a verb. However, unlike an independent clause, it cannot stand alone and is an incomplete thought. For example, what if I told you, even though they tend to be small? Huh? That doesn't make any sense. This is a dependent clause because you can see that although there is a subject and a verb, it doesn't make any sense, thanks to even though, which is a subordinating conjunction. But what if it were attached to another sentence, an independent clause? Okay, now that makes sense. Most gymnasts are very strong, even though they tend to be small. When an independent clause and a dependent clause come together to make a sentence, the sentence is called a complex sentence. Okay, remember, an independent clause can stand alone, just like me when I'm on my own 2 feet. However, when I'm standing on my hands, I need the wall to help me, just like a dependent clause needs an independent clause to help it stand up. Just like me trying to stand on my hands without the support of the wall, a dependent clause without an independent clause cannot stand alone because it does not communicate a complete thought. Okay, now we can talk about adverb clauses. An adverb clause is just one type of dependent clause, which starts with a subordinating conjunction like before, because, or although. Of course, there are many others, which I'll show you in a minute. And the adverb clause also functions as an adverb, which means that it gives us information about how, when, why, where, and under what conditions the activity takes place. Okay, here's a good example. This sentence has an independent clause and a dependent clause. Can you find the independent clause? Here's a hint. It can stand alone. That's right, there it is. That means that the other clause, the adverb clause, is a type of dependent clause, which starts with the subordinating conjunction when, which tells us when I fell on my head. Subordinating conjunctions can express different relationships between dependent and independent clauses. Take a look at these three examples. In the first sentence, the subordinating conjunction when shows a time relationship. In the second sentence, because shows a cause relationship. And finally, the subordinator even though in the third sentence shows an unexpected result, or what some people call a concession. There are other relationships that we can express with subordinating conjunctions in adverb clauses. However, you will learn about that in the next lesson. But I have one more important tip before we conclude. Adverb clauses can also come at the beginning of a sentence. For example, when I tried to stand on my hands, I fell on my head. Or, because I tried to stand on my hands, I fell on my head. And finally, even though I have strong arms, I fell on my head. Here's a quick look at a long list of subordinating conjunctions that might precede adverb clauses. In the next lesson, we'll take a closer look at how to use these different subordinators, and we'll also talk about punctuation. Thanks for listening. When the adverb clauses, punctuation and use. You already know that an adverb clause is a type of dependent clause that functions as an adverb and starts with a subordinating conjunction. For example, this complex sentence contains the adverb clause because their eyes are small, introduced by the subordinating conjunction because. Because is just one of many subordinating conjunctions we can use to introduce an adverb clause. An adverb clause may come at the beginning of the sentence. When it does, it is followed by a comma. It can also come at the end of a sentence. In most cases, no comma is needed. Although it's not common, it is possible to have an adverb clause in the middle of a sentence, between the subject and the verb of the main clause, as you see here in this example. When the adverb clause comes in the middle of a sentence, we will need 2 commas, one before it and one after it. There is an exception. When we use whereas and while to show direct contrast, as in this sentence, there will be a comma if the adverb clause comes at the beginning of the sentence and if it comes at the end. So in both cases, a comma is necessary. This is always true with whereas, but this is only true with while when we use while to show direct contrast, not when it is used to show a time relationship. Okay, now I'd like to show you a short video that'll give us some examples of adverb clauses in context. Let's check it out. So, Jake, my roommate, and I decided to have a dinner party, but I'm a little nervous because when it comes to cooking, Jake is, well, a little clumsy in the kitchen, and she doesn't always know exactly how to handle herself. But I don't want her to feel bad, so I'm going to try to work with her to prepare this dinner party the best that we can. Okay, you see 3 ideas here. We understand that these ideas are related to one another. To be a good writer and a good speaker in English, it's important to connect our ideas, which is why we use adverb clauses and other connected devices like the ones you've been learning throughout this course. So let's take a look at the relationship between the first two ideas. Jake lacks skills in the kitchen. The expectation would be that Emily won't want her help because she can't help in the kitchen. She's clumsy. However, the second idea says that Emily is going to ask for her help. So in this case, the relationship is an unexpected result. You'll remember that we can use the subordinating conjunctions although, even though, or though to show an unexpected result. In the second two ideas, the relationship is more of a cause relationship. Why is Emily going to ask for Jake's help? Well, because she doesn't want her to feel bad. Okay, now we can make a sentence to combine the first two ideas using the subordinating conjunction, even though. That looks good, right? And we're going to use because to connect the second two ideas. But if we were writing something here, we see that we have an idea that is repeated. Which idea is that? Yeah, Emily is going to ask for her help is in both sentences. So actually, we can combine these two sentences to make one sentence with two adverb clauses. Now we have connected all of these ideas together. Even though Jake lacks skills in the kitchen, Emily is going to ask for her help because she doesn't want to hurt her feelings. Notice that because we have two adverb clauses, we've put one at the beginning of the sentence and one at the end. This is generally a good way of placing adverb clauses when you have two of them. Okay, in the next video, you can watch Emily and Jake as they prepare for the dinner party. And you can practice using adverb clauses to express different relationships between ideas. Thank you for listening.
Subordinating conjunctions. Avoiding common mistakes. Mistake number 1 is a problem with commas. You may remember from another lesson that a comma is needed when you start a sentence with a dependent clause. If you write this sentence, because Jake is clumsy in the kitchen, Emily doesn't want her help. It is incorrect because you are missing a comma. In addition, if the dependent clause follows the independent clause, no comma is needed. Emily doesn't want her help because Jake is clumsy in the kitchen. This is incorrect. Do not put a comma before subordinating conjunctions. Mistake number 2, you used the wrong conjunction. Because I'm not good at dancing, I like dancing. In this example, the punctuation looks correct. However, this is wrong because the meaning is incorrect. Because shows cause and effect. These two clauses do not have a cause and effect relationship. The correct conjunction is, although I'm not good at dancing, I like it. Here is another example where the wrong conjunction is used. Before I woke up, I brushed my teeth. This does not make sense because in this sentence, this action happens first, and this action happens second. Unless you brush your teeth while you are sleeping, this isn't true. For the same reason, this sentence is also incorrect. After I brushed my teeth, I woke up. When you use the conjunction after, the first action should come immediately after this word. When you use before, the second action should come immediately after this word. Mistake number 3, you do not have a complete clause. I like the food Emily cooks because delicious. This is incorrect. Remember that after a subordinating conjunction, you should use a complete clause. Here we have a complete clause, but this is not a clause because you do not have a subject and a verb. It is correct to say, I like the food Emily cooks because it's delicious. Now there is a subject and a verb in the dependent clause. Mistake number 4, you have a fragment. In this example, we have an independent clause. Emily won't ask Jake to help her cook in the future. But the dependent clause is not a complete sentence unless Jake takes a cooking class. This clause cannot stand alone. This is called a fragment. It is just a small piece of a sentence. To fix this sentence, remove the period. Emily won't ask Jake to help her cook in the future unless Jake takes a cooking class. Mistake remove the period. Emily won't ask Jake to help her cook in the future unless Jake takes a cooking class. Clause cannot stand alone. This is called a fragment. It is just a small piece of a sentence. To fix this sentence, remove the period. Emily won't ask Jake to help her cook in the future unless Jake takes a cooking class. Mistake number 5, you have an extra conjunction. Here we have 2 independent clauses. Emily is a good cook, Jake is not. You know that you can combine them into a compound sentence like this. Emily is a good cook, but Jake is not. Or you can form a complex sentence. Although Emily is a good cook, Jake is not. You may wonder if we can combine these to say, although Emily is a good cook, but Jake is not. The answer is no. This is incorrect. When you use an adverb clause, the independent clause should not start with a coordinating conjunction. Mistake number 6. A subordinating conjunction is not a transition. Another common mistake is for learners to use a subordinating conjunction as a transition. It is incorrect to say, Jake put a pie in the oven after the pie shrunk, because after is not a transition. You could put a transition here. After that is a transition, but after is a subordinating conjunction. Do not put a comma after a subordinating conjunction. Emily didn't want Jake to help, although Jake wanted to help. This is also incorrect for the same reason. You may put a transition here instead. Or you could say it like this. Emily didn't want Jake to help, although Jake wanted to help. but Jake is not. Or you can form a complex sentence. Although Emily is a good cook, Jake is not. You may wonder if we can combine these to say, although Emily is a good cook, but Jake is not. The answer is no. This is incorrect. When you use an adverb clause, the independent clause should not start with a coordinating conjunction. Mistake number 6. A subordinating conjunction is not a transition. Another common mistake is for learners to use a subordinating conjunction as a transition. It is incorrect to say, Jake put a pie in the oven after the pie shrunk, because after is not a transition. You could put a transition here. After that is a transition, but after is a subordinating conjunction. Do not put a comma after a subordinating conjunction.
Reduce the adverb clauses that you learned in week 3 to phrases. This will make your writing and speaking more concise and will give you yet another way to make your writing and speech more varied and cohesive. Again, you will also learn the corresponding punctuation and grammar rules. Have fun! Reduced adverb clauses. Introduction. What is a reduced adverb clause? That's easy. A reduced adverb clause is a shortened adverb clause. And it does the same thing as an adverb clause, which means it functions like an adverb. It's also known as a participial phrase, or a modifying participial phrase. Take a look at this sentence. Can you spot the adverb clause? There it is, before you complete this lesson. You'll remember that an adverb clause is called a clause because it contains a subject and a verb. However, this is not true when we reduce it. A reduced adverb clause, like the one you'll see now, does not contain a subject and a verb. So now, before you complete this lesson has become before completing this lesson. The reduced adverb clause is called a participial phrase because it contains a present participle, or an ing verb. So if adverb clauses and reduced adverb clauses do the same job, I bet you're wondering, why do we even use reduced adverb clauses? It's a good question. One answer may just be that it's for a change of style. Just like we can change up our hairstyle to express ourselves, we could choose to use a modifying phrase rather than a clause to express our writing style. Another reason to use a reduced adverb clause is to simplify a sentence. Imagine you have a very long, complicated sentence with an adverb clause. If this adverb clause can be reduced, reduce it. This will make your writing a lot more concise and understandable. So when can an adverb clause be reduced to a phrase? This is an important question to ask because we can only reduce an adverb clause if the subject is the same in both clauses, meaning in the adverb clause and the main clause. For example, in this sentence, after Polly rolled around in the mud, She was dirty and disheveled from head to toe. Polly. In the first clause and she in the second clause are referring to the same subject, that little pig you see there. So can we reduce this adverb clause? Yes, we can. However, in this sentence, after Polly rolled around in the mud, Pablo asked if he could join her. Polly, in the adverb clause, is not the same subject as Pablo in the main clause. So can we reduce this adverb clause? Absolutely not. You'll remember that adverb clauses can communicate many different types of relationships between ideas. Generally speaking, we can only reduce adverb clauses that express time, cause, or contrast. For example, this adverb clause of time, this adverb clause of cause, and this adverb clause of contrast can all be reduced. Here's how. Take a look at the first sentence. After you finish this course is reduced to after finishing this course. Since you will be an expert is reduced to being an expert. And finally, though mastering English grammar can be difficult is reduced to though difficult. Don't you like the sound of that? I bet you would like to learn how to reduce adverb clauses on your own. Well, you're in luck. In the next lessons, you will learn exactly how to reduce adverb clauses to make your writing more concise and more styling. Are you excited? I hope so. See you next time. Reduced adverb clauses. Type 1. When reducing clauses with after, before, since, when, and while, there are 3 steps you must follow. Number 1. Omit or delete the subject in the adverb clause. Number 2. Omit be from the adverb clause, if present. And number 3. If no be verb is present, change the verb to a present participle, or an ing verb. Let's take a look at an example.
Emily,
Hey.
don't forget our faculty pictures are today.
That's right! Faculty pictures? Shoot. I'm a mess. This hair.
Emily was not aware of the photo day before Jake told her about it. Can we reduce the adverb clause in this sentence? Do you remember the rule I told you about reducing adverb clauses? The subject must be the same in the main clause and the dependent clause. Emily is the subject in the main clause, and Jake is the subject in the adverb clause. So it looks like we cannot reduce this adverb clause. Let's take a look at another sentence. Emily was not aware of the photo day before she talked to Jake. Now, Emily in the first clause and she in the second clause are referring to the same subject, which means we can reduce the adverb clause. So step 1, omit the subject. Step 2, omit be, but as you can see, there's no be verb. So let's move on to step 3. We're going to change the verb to an ing verb, a present participle. Now we've got ourselves a reduced adverb clause. Emily was not aware of the photo day before talking to Jake. Okay, let's take a look at some more examples. Happy Monday! You like this new haircut? All right. In this sentence, we have an adverb clause. After she realized she didn't like her hair, Emily decided to get a haircut. Follow the steps to reduce this adverb clause. What does it become when you reduce it? Good. The new phrase should be after realizing. Let's try again. In this sentence, we have an adverb clause. Since Emily got a haircut, she has been a lot more confident. Can you reduce the adverb clause? It's easy. Since getting a haircut, Emily has been a lot more confident. It's easy. Since getting a haircut, Emily has been a lot more confident.
Love my life. Hey, Jake, how's it going?
Okay, Emily danced around without a care while she was at work. Can you reduce the adverb clause while she was at work? Notice, since the main verb is be, we will be left without a verb at all. Emily danced around without a care while at work. How about this one? While Jake was watching Emily dance, she had a puzzled look on her face. Can you reduce it? Good. While watching Emily dance, Jake had a puzzled look on her face. Okay, let's look at one more important rule regarding reducing time clauses. We can use when in the same way that I just showed you how to use the other subordinators of time. For example, when Jake saw Emily dancing ridiculously, she took a candid snapshot. You know we can reduce that to, when seeing Emily dancing ridiculously, Jake took a candid snapshot. However, there is another common way to reduce adverb clauses that contain the subordinator when, and that's by changing the word when to upon. So, candid snapshot. You know we can reduce that to, when seeing Emily dancing ridiculously, Jake took a candid snapshot. However, there is another common way to reduce adverb clauses that contain the subordinator when, and that's by changing the word when to upon. So the reduced adverb clause would become, upon seeing Emily dancing ridiculously. This is only true with when. Let's try another example. When Emily walked into the room, she struck a pose. Can you change this adverb clause to a reduced adverb clause in more ways than one? Here's one way. When walking into the room, Emily struck a pose. How about the other way? Good. Upon walking into the room, Emily struck a pose. Something else to be aware of when reducing adverb clauses is to make sure to change any unclear pronouns. You can see that in the original adverb clause, the proper noun Emily is used and the pronoun she is thus used in the main clause. So, when eliminating the subject from the now reduced adverb clause, it also makes sense to change the pronoun back to the proper noun, as to avoid confusion. Okay, let's quickly talk about where we can put these reduced adverb clauses. A reduced adverb clause most commonly comes at the beginning of a sentence. If it does, it's followed by a comma. It can also come at the end of a sentence. In this case, no comma is needed. And finally, it is possible for it to come in the middle, right after the subject. If this is the case, we need a comma before it and after it. Okay, that concludes this lesson on reducing adverb clauses of time. I hope you enjoyed it. Now, I've got to get busy and get to the hair salon to fix this crazy hair. Thanks for listening.
Adverbials, Type 2. You may remember this scenario from a previous lesson. Because Jake saw how happy Emily was with her new hair, she was jealous. Now, let's watch what happens next.
Hey, Emily, can I borrow your, lunch?
Who are you?
It's me, Jake.
Jake?
I got my hair cut.
You did! Oh my god! It looked fantastic!
And I feel great too!
Yeah!
You may remember one way to reduce an adverb clause from a previous lesson. Let's look at two sentences. While Jake was sitting in the office, she saw Emily. After Jake cut her hair, Emily didn't recognize her. You probably recall that we can only reduce one of these adverb clauses. This adverb clause cannot be reduced because the subjects are not the same. In this sentence, the subjects are the same, and we can reduce it to, while sitting in the office, she saw Emily. We can do this by using the subordinating conjunction and the ing form of the verb. Today, we will discuss a second type of reduction. Let's look at how to reduce this sentence even more. When we use while, meaning at the same time, we can also drop while and start the clause with the ing verb. So we can say, sitting in the office, she saw Emily, which has the same meaning as the reduction that we already saw. While sitting in the office, she saw Emily. Both of these reductions have the same meaning as the full form of the sentence. Remember that all three sentences are correct and have the same meaning. The difference is only a matter of style, just like our haircuts. In this lesson, we'll be focusing on the shortest reduction. Here's another example. While Emily was working quietly at her desk, she was thinking about her hair. If we want to drop while, we must also drop the subject and be verb. The clause now starts with the ing verb. Working quietly at her desk, she was thinking about her hair. The only time clause that we can reduce in this way is a clause starting with while. In the next sentence, before Jake cut her hair, she was sad, we cannot delete before. So if we say, cutting her hair, she was sad, this is incorrect. You may remember from the previous lesson that we can reduce the clause like this, but we must keep before. In addition to reducing time clauses, we can also reduce clauses of cause and effect, as in this example. Because Jake has short hair, she was unrecognizable. Before reducing any adverb clause, we should check to see if the subjects are the same in both clauses. Jake and she are the same person, so yes, we can reduce the adverb clause. In a previous lesson, you learned to reduce the clause in this way. Delete the subject and change the verb to ing. But we cannot do this for a cause and effect clause. So it is wrong to do this. Because having short hair, she was unrecognizable. No, this type of reduction is only for time clauses. So, how can we reduce a cause and effect clause? We must delete because, the subordinating conjunction, and the subject. Then, change the verb to the ing form. Having short hair, she was unrecognizable. In this case, we might not know who she is, so it is a good idea to name the person or thing you are talking about. Having short hair, Jake was unrecognizable. Here's another example. Since Jake wants to look like Emily, she decided to cut her hair too. This is also a cause and effect clause. Remember, since can also mean because. Now, let's reduce this clause. First, delete the conjunction and the subject. Next, change the verb to the ing form. The correct sentence is, wanting to look like Emily, Jake decided to cut her hair too. Notice that the first clause in the original sentence is in present tense. Now, let's look at a past tense example. Because Jake had cut her hair, Emily didn't recognize her. Now, let's reduce it. Are you ready? Well, you should say, "No, Jake, I am not ready because we cannot reduce this clause. There are two different subjects." I'm just making sure you're paying attention. Okay, here's a clause that we can reduce. Because Jake had cut her hair, Jake was unrecognizable. First, delete these two words. Now, notice that we have past perfect tense. So, we are going to change this verb to the ing form. Having cut her hair, Jake was unrecognizable. When we see having and the past participle of the verb, this means because and in the past. To review, here are three types of adverb clauses that can be reduced to start with the ing verb. While, since, but only when it means cause and effect, and because. Type 3. You may remember this scenario from a previous lesson. Because Jake had seen Emily's new haircut, she felt jealous. Remember that to reduce a clause starting with because, we must delete the subordinating conjunction and the subject. Then, change this verb into the ing form. When we start a reduced adverb clause with having and the past participle, this means because, and it means the action happened in the past. This makes sense because we just changed the original verb had to the ing form, like you may remember from previous lessons. In fact, we can use have and the past participle to reduce a clause that does not contain had in the original sentence. Let's see an example. Because Jake got a haircut, she felt more confident. Notice that the verb is in the simple past tense. Since this is because in the past, we are going to start the reduction with having and the past participle. The reduction is, having gotten a haircut, she felt more confident. Let's compare two sentences with different tenses. Because I want to be a better swimmer, I practice a lot. Because I wanted a different hairstyle, I got a haircut. In the first sentence, we have the simple present tense. In the second sentence, we have the simple past tense. Let's focus on the past tense sentence first. You know that we must delete because and the subject. And since it is in the past, we can start with having and the past participle. Now, let's look at our present tense sentence. Again, we must delete because and the subject. But since this action is not in the past, we cannot add having. So, we will just change the verb to the ing form. You can see the difference between a reduction with because in the present and a reduction with because in the past. Because Emily was unable to recognize Jake, she was surprised. Now you know that we can reduce this sentence like this. Having been unable to recognize Jake, Emily was surprised. When you have be in the past, it is possible just to reduce it to the ing form. Being unable to recognize Jake, Emily was surprised. In fact, when we start a reduced adverb clause with the be verb, it is possible to reduce it even more. We can delete the be verb and begin the sentence with the adjective. Unable to recognize Jake, Emily was surprised. This is just another style with the same meaning. With the be verb, it is possible. Being unable to recognize Jake, Emily was surprised. In fact, when we start a reduced adverb clause with the be verb, it is possible to reduce it even more. We can delete the be verb and begin the sentence with the adjective. Unable to recognize Jake, Emily was surprised. This is just another style with the same meaning. Here's another reduction. Having drunk 3 cups of coffee before noon, I felt anxious. In this lesson, we've seen that this is the reduced form of because I had drunk 3 cups of coffee before noon, I felt anxious. This is the past perfect tense. Or it is also the reduction of because I drank 3 cups of coffee before noon, I felt anxious. This is the simple past tense. The reductions of these 2 clauses are the same. These 3 sentences all have the same meaning. Finally, let's look at one more way to start a clause with having and the past participle. You may remember from a previous lesson that we can reduce this clause. After the teacher started class, he assigned a new project. We can reduce it by deleting the subject and changing this verb to the ing form. After starting class, the teacher assigned a new project. This sentence has the same meaning as this sentence with the past perfect. After the teacher had started class, class, he assigned a new project. They are both about actions that happened in the past. When your clause begins with after and it is about the past, it is possible to reduce it in the same way that we reduced because. Change this verb to the ing form. Having started class, the teacher assigned a new project. Now, you know, if a sentence starts with because or after and is in the past, you can start the reduction with having and the past participle.